Joining me now to discuss, internist at Custom Care Medical, Dr. Frank Contessessa. Dr. Frank, you and I have had this discussion before. My issue here is how come the mainstream society or the mainstream institutions and media networks, they're not pushing people to do the most basic thing to stop something that would prevent us from shutting down the economy again?
Well, it's great to be back with you, Carl. And your monologue was spot on, I have to say. There were so many points there where I was nodding my head like a bobblehead, because you really nailed it. And there's one aspect and one force that you forgot to mention, and it's the food industry. Mm-hmm. The food industry is against this as well. The choices that are out there, unless you're a cook and you know what you're doing, the prepared foods are terrible for us. The processed foods are terrible for us. Mm-hmm. And they've led us down the wrong path. When you talk about the government and the FDA and the food pyramid, the horrible food pyramid that came out in the 70s and 80s, that created the problems that we're dealing with now. The food pyramid in the 70s and 80s told us that fat was bad, mm-hmm. and fat's the enemy, and they pushed us into a low-fat diet. A low-fat diet is by necessity a high-carb, high-sugar diet. So what they did was they created obesity, diabetes, and heart disease in epidemic levels.
Well, it's interesting, Dr. Frank, you mentioned that because, I only shop around the outer ring of the grocery store. I don't even go in the aisles, all the crap food in there. But to your point, this is huge. If you go back 40 years ago, 99% of the items in the grocery store had an expiration date in under 2 weeks. Now, 90% of the things in the grocery store do not expire for greater than 2 weeks. What does that do for your health now?
Well, obviously, to make that happen, they have to add something to your food, and it's called preservatives. And these are chemicals that stretch the shelf life. They were never intended, God never intended for us to put these things in our bodies. Mm-hmm. So we really have to, and like you said, it's about education. And I spend a lot of time with my patients teaching them how to do this, because it's really not that hard, not that complicated. It takes a little bit of knowledge and it takes a little bit of discipline, because anybody can live a healthy lifestyle. So it's worth my time to spend 20 minutes with somebody to go over their meal plan and say, no, you don't do this. This is not the right way to do it. Here's how you do it. Yeah,
well, Doc, the bigger problem, though, is our institutions. They're putting a Band-Aid on basically a mortal wound by just saying, oh, we'll give you this. Well, they're just addressing the symptoms of this. They're not addressing the root of the problem. How do we get word to the CDC, the WHO, all these other agencies that are telling us all these other things to do, to just say, hey, just be a little bit healthier?
Well, I'm not sure they're going to be a terribly receptive audience, Carl. They know these things. They know these things better than us. But you follow where the money comes from. There's too much money to be made on the pharmaceuticals that you mentioned. Why go on a diet when you could just take an injection now? So now we're dealing with drugs that were intended for diabetes. You just take a shot once a week and you're going to lose 10, 15, 20 pounds. So it's not going to be a receptive audience. We need to do it, guys like you, guys like me, who have an audience, and tell people this is not the right way. Listen to us. We know what's right. And, sometimes people say, well, how do I know what's healthy to eat? Should I hire a nutritionist? And I say, don't we know that potato chips are bad and vegetables are good? You're going to pay somebody? You're going to pay somebody to tell you to eat less potato chips and to eat more vegetables?
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. And we're not teaching it when we talk about our kids, growing up. 20-year-olds are like 40% obese now. At some point, the system, obviously Obamacare was a massive takeover of 1/6 of the economy. Is this all part of a plan to try to make us more dependent on the government?
I don't know. I don't know what the plan is. It kind of seems like it, because if you put everything together, it seems like that's a possibility. But we have control. We have autonomy. And this goes to the topic of mandates, whether it's mask mandates, whether it's vaccine mandates. I'm a big believer in patients and human beings' autonomy. And we have the right to make the decision for ourselves, what's best for us, in conjunction with a doctor and somebody who cares about you. Yeah. But we have autonomy. It comes down to us.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Frank, we appreciate you being here very much, sir.
Thank you, Carl.